Hello, everyone. Welcome. And like we said, good morning, good afternoon, good almost evening. My name is Lindsay Lee. I'm the Executive Director on the North America side of Renewed, and we're excited to present the Cybersecurity Risk and Publishing webinar. And John Hitchcock is going to be our moderator, and he will introduce Michael and Eric. Just a few reminders, if you could please keep yourself on mute. We'd love to see your videos on if we could see you. We will send out the recording after the webinar, most likely tomorrow. So feel free to rewatch it. And then if you'd like, if you want to go ahead and in our chat box, go ahead and put your LinkedIn, that'd be great. And then we can all connect. And it's always fun to have other connections. So John, off to you.
Well, thanks very much, Lindsay. The idea for this webinar was born in the aftermath of a cyber attack of one of our Renewed members. And I think if we look back and are honest with ourselves, all of us have faced one form of an attack or another over the last few years. I know at Energy Intelligence Group, we had an attack early on in the pandemic, as a matter of fact. And in the end, we knew when it happened, how it happened, where it happened. We even knew the bank account to which the money that had been taken from our accounts fraudulently was deposited. But could we get any of that back? No. And that's kind of the point. There are laws that obviously are on our side. No one's supposed to attack us. But when it comes to defending ourselves against that, or even pursuing folks who are attacking us, it's up to us, which is why Renewed, as part of its great responsibilities to the publishing and events world and to its members, puts together webinars like this. And I'm pleased to have with us folks who represent both the inside of our world and the outside. Inside meaning part of the publishing business, and outside meaning people who are looking at publishing as outside consultants. Mr. Inside for this show is Mike Heritage, who's the Vice President of Cybersecurity for the Financial Times, having joined the FT a couple of years ago, I guess, Mike, from the telecom and retail world. So he has a deep understanding of how it is to defend against these sorts of activities from inside companies. Eric Cole, on the other hand, who's the CEO and founder of Secure Anchor, is out on the outside. He hasn't always been that way. And in fact, he had a very interesting inside job near the beginning of his career. And that is that he was a hacker for the CIA, who then went on to become the head of the Obama administration's cybersecurity task force. Eric, Michael, thank you very much for joining us. We'll spend a few minutes with conversations among ourselves, and the tail end of the show, final 20 minutes or so, will be all about questions from the audience. Audience members, please get ready to raise hands or put questions into chat, which Lindsay will be happy to transfer out of chat and into the mix when the mix is ready to be met. But in the beginning, to just get us started, I'd like to ask Mike and Eric, if you would, how did you get drawn into cybersecurity in the beginning? It's not everybody's idea of a career, but here you are.
Shall I go first, John?
Sure, Mike.
Yeah, I mean, cyber's a second career for me. I started off really in law enforcement. Most of my work in life's been in law enforcement, namely the police in the UK. Most of that time I spent in covert policing, if I'm honest, doing surveillance and sort of a lot more of the covert edge of the policing, proactive policing areas. And I was a very slow progressor in the police. I did about 20 years as a detective before my crewmate decided he was going to retire, and I thought, I don't really want a new crewmate, and no one wants someone who can go and hide in the bush when they're retired, for a living. So I thought I'd better do something more useful. I got myself promoted and got into the world of computer forensics in the police. Really lucky, because the police throw money at their people. I got myself completely trained up as a computer forensics person. Got got sort of a master's degree in that. Went from Thames Valley Police into the Metropolitan Police, where the Police Central League Crime Unit was, and there we were investigating cybercrime from all over the world. That became a precursor to the National Crime Agency, and I went across to the National Cybercrime Unit, where I set up what we call the proactive forensics team there. So we used to support the investigations into these criminals with not only the reactive forensics on the devices that we seize, but also in the capture and live capture of metadata and data to help drive the investigations forward. After a while, I realised I could probably make more money from this in the private sector, if I'm honest. I'd done everything I needed to do in the police. I had a real great career. I carried guns, ridden motorbikes, done all the sort of super sexy stuff. Decided it was time to leave, and then managed to get myself a job at my first job in the real world, if you like. It was at Colt Telecom, where I was a cybersecurity manager, and it's then that I realised actually I knew about that much. If you can't see me, apologies, a very small bit of an absolutely massive area, and you continue learning for the next 10 years really, and building on that knowledge. It's such a wide and varied place to be. And then moved around various companies, ended up here at the FT. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell, John.
Well, that's great, and it is a wide world. I mean, that's one of the difficulties of the renewed members, is that we don't have the resources necessarily to cover the wide world. But hopefully you and Eric will be able to give us some idea of where we can get this, how we can get this started. Eric, how about you? How did you end up in this mess?
So I'm going to take you back to 1990. Now, just to put you in context, 1990, the World Wide Web didn't exist. That didn't come out until 1993. We didn't have laptops. You didn't have computers at your home. If you were using the internet, you probably had either an AOL or a CompuServe account. And just to put you in full swing, we were probably wearing baggy pants, parachute pants, and maybe listening to the Bee Gees. So completely different time in 1990. I was recruited by the CIA, and I was actually doing artificial intelligence predictive planning to help track terrorist activity. And we started looking at this thing called the internet, and I started exploring it. And I asked a very dangerous question. And the dangerous question I asked was, how do we know that applications we put on the internet are secure? And the answer is, you don't, only by breaking in. There's no mathematical proof that you can run to go in and verify. And then the other hard truth is, if you have any functionality, you have security risks. The general premise I learned then, and I still teach today, is 100% security equals zero functionality, which means as soon as you add servers, as soon as you add people, as soon as you add laptops, you're no longer secure. Every system has risks. The trick is the risk acceptable for the functionality you're adding? And that's sort of a theme that I've carried out through my 35-year career, is just helping organizations, not saying no, but asking them two simple questions. What's the value and benefit of the tech versus what is the risk and exposure? And is that risk or exposure worth that benefit? And then that's how we sort of make decisions. So asking that question, I basically became what we call an ethical hacker or a professional hacker for the CIA. I basically got into the dark underworld, very active at that time in the dark web, very active with many of the different hacking groups, and basically embedded myself into thinking, acting like the adversary, thinking like the hackers. And that's a skill I still bring to the table today. So even though I've never did illegal hacking, what I bring to the table is I think differently. I look at things differently. When I look at a problem, I look at it from the offensive standpoint of, okay, how am I going to exploit you? How am I going to take advantage of you? How am I going to use that information to cause harm to you? But the good news is I then flip it back saying, okay, what's the most cost-effective way to implement security measures to make it so it's not worthwhile for them to come after you? Because at the end of the day, most attacks are not deliberately targeted at you. Most attackers don't wake up in the morning and say, I'm coming after John Hitchcock. What they do is they say, Publishers have a lot of information, they have a lot of critical data, and they'll pay a ransom because if their data is not available for 48 to 72 hours, that's going to cost them significant amount. So what we try to do is, how can we make your security sort of good enough and better than the next person, so when they try to break in, it's too difficult, that they essentially move on to somebody else, and you then are secure. And the whole idea of all this is preventive is so much better than detective. And just sort of wrapping up this answer, in my experience, here's some hard numbers. Every hour you spend on preventive, if you don't, it's going to be 50x on reaction. So if you spend an hour preventing an attack, that's going to save you over 50 hours of responsive time if you actually get broken into. And then with monetary, it's usually about 100x. So if you spent $1,000 on preventive measures, and if you fail to do that, you would probably spend about 100K on reactive measures cleaning up after the attacker. So the reality is, it takes time to do preventive security, but it's a lot quicker and a lot cheaper than dealing with the attack after the fact.
Well, thank you, Eric. I take your point. I think the only person who wakes up in the morning wondering how are we going to get at John Hitchcock is my boss. I don't think that's probably part of the dark web's business, but you're right. And we're going to come back at the end of our first round of questions and talk a little bit about those trade-offs, the risk reward, because as you say, you can 100% security, zero functionality. No one wants functionality at zero. That doesn't work. That's kind of defeats the purpose. You put out some pretty scary figures, Eric, and that suggests, again, echoing back to the cyber attack that didn't do in, but certainly cost a lot of time and a little bit of money for our fellow Renewed member at the beginning. I mentioned at the beginning of the show. So that attacks are very, very time consuming and very potentially very costly. Looking back, both of you, what's kind of the scariest, most expensive attack that you have witnessed? I don't know, Eric or Mike, who would like to take that question first, but just to give folks a sense of the chills, what have you seen that really kind of caused you to have your hair stand on end? Not literally, but perhaps figuratively.
Yeah, I mean, I can talk about a couple from my point of view, which won't be anywhere near as exciting as Eric's probably, but I can tell you. But from a personal point of view, when you wake in the middle of the pandemic, and we're going on to a stand-up call one morning, and one of my security analysts saying to me, "Oh, this is weird. What's this Mimikatz thing, this detection I've got?" And it was like, "Sorry, what?" And if those of you don't know, I'm sure Eric knows, but Mimikatz is a password stealer. It's a real favourite of hackers out there. And then we found out this was on our system, and suddenly we found out that we'd been compromised. We had basically our domain controllers, the whole works had been taken over. In the middle of the pandemic, we rushed everyone to get home, set up some things, not optimally, VPNs that didn't have MFA, and I'm sure we'll both talk about MFA later on. But a real example there of luckily for me, I had the risk written down that we shouldn't do this without MFA, but we did. Got compromised. Luckily, we picked up in the morning before they got to deploy the ransomware into the estate. They got to a place where they got their foothold. They got our domain access. But we got on then and managed to get some good incident response partners in pretty much straight away to get in there and basically boot them out of our estate. It takes a long time to get over that. And Eric's exactly right on the amount of time it took just for us to do what we call a golden ticket password reset, which is at the very top domain level, a password reset on the whole estate. Our incident response was saying you need to do this now. It took us a month because of all the stuff that's going on around this estate. We could not do this password set quick enough.
Wow.
And a very quick one, another one, a sister company of mine. I remember, I think it was just after Christmas, I got a call from my opposite number at a delivery firm in the UK saying, "We're in trouble. Everything's been encrypted. What do I do?" I said, "Well, look, you are in trouble. here's the number of some people, give them a call, it will cover by our insurance, just get them out there. And we're talking multi-millions it cost them in ransom payments, because if they didn't, they would have had no company left. So
Wow.
that's the real cost of that. And the real benefit for them of having a proper ransomware negotiator involved at that stage as well. And anyone who is involved in this, I can't overstate the importance of getting a professional ransomware negotiator on your side to start talking. It was they were worth their weight in gold in that situation, because not only do they buy you time, but they also make sure that what you're paying for is what you get. That if you're paying for an encryption, it will actually unencrypt your stuff. So it's really, and you generally they'll argue down probably to about half price of what they're asking at least. But yeah, so there's a couple of bits there. But both one was a really bad morning for me. One was one of those mornings you think, "Whew, thank God it's not me."
It could be worse. Well, ransomware negotiator. Who would have thought? That's takeaway number one for this webinar. Eric, how about you? What's a scary story you'd like to use to illustrate what we're talking about here?
Well, I was going to say, Mike sort of teed it up nicely, because one of the roles we do play is I do ransomware negotiation, because a negotiator needs to speak the language of an attacker. The biggest problem is you have a business person or an executive, or worst case scenario, I love them because I work with a lot of them. They're my good friends, but lawyers. You have a lawyer talking to a cyber criminal or a cyber attacker, and the cyber attacker is just going to eat them alive. So you have to recognize what's most important to that cyber criminal is that they can get their money very quickly, they can get out very quickly, and they don't get caught. They don't care about reinfection. So the big things that we always do with the cybercrime negotiation is, first, we actually negotiate partial payment, where we give them some money, but then they have to give us the fix. They have to give us the remediation and the whole. And then after we fix them, we'll then pay them an additional. But Mike's right. Typically, like if you look at Colonial Pipeline, SolarWinds, those are some of the big ones. You can read about them. I won't go into detail. I worked on those cases, but the original ransom, like with the Colonial Pipeline, was 22 mil, and we got them down to about 4.5. So the trick is you're probably going to have to pay if you have ransomware, but you could pay a lot less and you can get a lot more value out of it than what they're actually initially asking. But instead of giving you ones that are in the news, probably one of the scariest ones I ever worked on was when my phone goes off at 2 a.m. in the morning. It's never going to be a good day. I wish attackers would hack like 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, but that's never the case. It's always weekends and holidays. And this happened to be 2 a.m. Christmas morning. So 4 years ago, my kids weren't happy, but I was actually on a plane, and it was a nuclear reactor. Actually got hacked and compromised, and was probably within about 2 hours of a meltdown or a massive impact, but we were able to fix it. And the reason I'm bringing it up is not to scare you, but this lesson. You know what caused it? One person connected one system to the internet. It was basically 2 days before the holiday season, and one of their accounting firms needed to do final recollection for their billing system, and their current billing system wasn't working correctly. So in nuclear, you have segmentation of networks. You have your CDA network, which shouldn't be connected to the internet. And then you have your public network, which I believe even small companies, medium-sized companies, publishing companies should do the same thing. You should have two different networks, one connected to the internet, one not, because it's that dangerous. And because they wanted to reconcile, famous last words, what could possibly go wrong? And they connected one system on the private network to the internet. It was a system that was unpatched, which is typical of reactors. Attackers found it within 32 hours, just scanning the internet, found it, exploited it, and broke in within another 10 hours. So the big lessons here is anything connected to the internet, directly or indirectly, as a target. So you got to be really careful of your critical systems and critical data. And attackers are scanning the internet. Right now, our best estimate, because we have honeypots up all over, is that we put up a brand new system anywhere in the world, and it will typically be scanned and pinged within about 15 hours and will be exploited within 25. So the reality is your systems will be found. The other important data point for all of you, which could be a good news or a bad news, is very often when a system is exploited, if it's often not what we call actively manipulated for typically 3 to 4 months, because what they're going to do is they have these scanning tools that are automatic. They're going to break in and they're going to put malware on there that's in passive hidden mode, so there's no indication. But then you need a manual person to actually run the exploit. And because the systems are getting exploited so quick, there's a backlog with the attackers where they typically can't get to the systems for 3 months. So the good news is from when you get infected to when it's actually exploited or damaged can often be weeks or months, which means you do something we call threat hunting, where you're actively looking for compromised systems because there is a window from compromise to exploitation.
You know, it's interesting because both you and Mike had mentioned that there was a little bit of time, and I think and sometimes much time, Eric, as you're suggesting, if it's a matter of weeks and months. And I would have thought that when you're attacked, that's it, over and out. You've got seconds, and then it's gone. But it sounds like you do have a means to mitigate if you know how to mitigate. So let me ask each of you, if in setting things up, what just to make it simple, what would be 3 things you'd suggest every company do to mitigate, or 3 things that you'd have to deploy to minimize your exposure to millions of dollars worth of damage?
I mean, I can, the really obvious one that everyone will say is multi-factor authentication everywhere you possibly can do it. And I can't underestimate how important that is. I think Microsoft says that gets rid of 99% of all attacks straight off the bat. It's not infallible. You can absolutely get around MFA. But it then becomes a targeted attack. You're talking SIM swaps, and you're talking all sorts of other things that have to go in place there. So that's the one. But if you haven't got it on, if anyone's using Microsoft Office 365 and hasn't turned on MFA, you will be hacked at some stage. It's just an absolute guarantee.
The double endorsement on that. So
yeah, absolutely turn on. And I mean, Eric can probably talk about that other stuff, but just do the basics is what I would say. Just make sure that you look after your. Someone's at the front door. Give me 1 second, Ted.
Different sort of cyber attack.
Make sure that you do your basics. You look after your identity is another great one. Just make sure that you understand who should be on your systems and who shouldn't. If you've got a leaver, make sure that they're a leaver. Yeah. Sorry about this. Yeah, that's fine, Ted. He knows where it is.
Mike, do you want me to jump in so you can deal with that, or?
Yeah, you carry on. Sorry, my apologies, people.
Okay, yeah, I'll jump in quick, and then Mike can jump back in. Yeah, so it's always fun going second because then I get to do with the fun stuff. Because Mike hit MFA, which is an easy one. The second is really awareness and understanding your systems and your environment. A lot of times when our clients get compromised, we hear things like, "Oh, we didn't know that server was on the network. We didn't know that system was still active. We didn't know that it wasn't patched or correctly." So really basic. You need to know, or somebody in your organization needs to know all the systems that you have, what systems are visible from the internet, and patch. Almost all of the server-based attacks we're seeing today are unpatched systems. You might have heard the term zero-day attack, which is a brand new unknown attack that can break into the most secure systems. But those aren't needed today because so many people are not patching. So any system accessible or visible from the internet, you have to patch. That's like every breach that I've ever seen over the last 3 years when servers are compromised were unpatched systems. Second, you need to go in and make sure you're running endpoint security. They call it EDR. They have all different names for it now, but essentially security on your client. And one of the most important things, it's simple, it's easy, it sounds impactful, it's not. For external addresses, turn off embedded emails. So embedded links or attachments from external emails is the #1 cause of phishing attacks. And during the holiday season, OMG. Like, it is off the charts. I got 3 this morning already. I got 2 text messages. One text message was supposedly from FedEx. It wasn't. One text message supposedly from UPS. It wasn't. And one email from Amazon that wasn't. Users, especially around the holiday season, but even during the year, are so anxious to get their presents that they're going to click on links. If we can go in and turn off embedded links, turn off attachments, that goes a long way. Third, these devices out of the box are very, very secure. We make them very vulnerable by putting on free apps. 90% of the free apps you have on your phone are spying on you. They're listening to what you're saying and you're not using them. Simplify. If you haven't used an app in 3 months, delete it. Get it off your device, get it off your phone, and just cleaning up free apps, not clicking on links and embedded links, and patching your servers will put you in the elite 90% and prevent a lot of the attacks that are going on right now.
Wow. Okay. Well, thank you. Mike, you thwarted an attack at your door. What have you learned? What can you share? What are your suggestions?
That's the oil being delivered. I would 100% believe, agree with Eric and everything he said there. What would if you're in an enterprise environment and you can, take over management of this stuff, phones, if you can take over the management of them and control what the users put on their phone, that's even better. And the browser is another one. If you can control that browser and make sure people can't add on all these Google Chrome add-ons, all these different add-ons that people just randomly download. Grammarly is a great one, isn't it? Grammarly, everything you type into a document then goes out to the server, and they learn from it. OpenAI, all these new AI tools. If you're not taking control of that and having an enterprise agreement with an AI provider, all of the stuff you're writing is going to them, and they get hold of it all, and it's stored, and they're using it for learning. So more from an enterprise point of view, the more you can control what people could do about it. Not looking at what people are doing, but just understanding that you can't put all this random stuff on. You can't start throwing stuff into Dropbox. You can't start loading all your stuff up into you can't start sending emails out to your web-based browser for your home email, all that type of good stuff. But yeah, just basic hygiene. And I guess the last one is user education, because it's, Eric's right, phishing is still the number one, and you can, there are still, we get a lot of individuals in our business still reporting stuff that's got through of our controls, and they pick it up. They click on a lot of stupid stuff as well, but they do pick up these probably more sophisticated phishing attacks. The users still pick it up and report them. That's because they get good training on how to spot a phishing email, which is becoming more difficult with AI, unfortunately.
Well, yeah, let's talk a little bit about AI and some of the other new twists that there are out there that we have to worry about. I would assume that, kind of the just as we as Renewed members are constantly looking for new forms of programming and new publications and new ways to stimulate our audiences, that cyber threats have new faces almost monthly, if not weekly. What are some of the new twists that you've seen that might be worth our worrying about?
So I would say a couple. First is, we always said just because it's on the internet, you can't believe it. And if you haven't looked at deep fakes yet, you definitely need to. And that's where basically they're taking videos of me, my voice, and others, and they're creating content that wasn't me. And just to show you, you can't tell my mom this because she didn't realize she was in on the joke. I didn't believe that deep fake was that good. So I actually made a bet with some of my hacker friends, and they actually did a holiday greeting that wasn't me. It was deep fake. The video, the audio, everything was fake. And they sent it to my mom, and she actually thought it was me. It fooled my own mom. That's how good it was. It's not, if you looked at it 6 months ago, it used to be glitchy, like the lips would move weird or there'd be stuttering and stuff, but it's improved so much. It looks perfect. Like, if it can fool mom, it's perfect. So you have to be super careful of what content people are putting out about you, your executives, your customers, or others, because you can't even trust video. You can't even trust audio anymore because the AI stuff is that good if you have a lot of content out there. And that's sort of the risk with me, because I'm a big influencer. I do a lot on social. And the more I put out there, the more exposed I become to somebody faking or putting false content. Second thing real quick is, because of AI, phishing attacks are real. They look exactly real. We used to tell people, check the domain name if it's like USPS.AI, if it's weird stuff. That doesn't work anymore. It can look perfect. It can seem perfect. The reality is today, you cannot click on links. You cannot open attachments. If you get a text from UPS, go to the app. If you get an email from Amazon with an attachment, go to the app. Don't trust links. Go to the apps. And third, real quick, is AI is overhyped in security. So just because a security vendor says they're AI enabled or they're AI powered, still test their technology. There's some good stuff out there, but there's a lot of really bad stuff that is faking behind AI. And I work with a lot of publishing companies, and they're like, well, Eric, we bought this tech because they had a great sales pitch and they said it was AI enabled, and it was garbage. So just be careful. AI enabled doesn't mean anything. Test any security product before you buy it and make sure it really works.
Well, Eric, your story about faking your mother reminds me of in journalism, we say, if your mother tells you she loves you, check it out. You've just given us a corollary. If your mother's son says it's me, tell your mother to check it out.
Exactly.
That's sad, Eric. Shame on you for fooling your mother like that.
I know.
Mike, certainly you wouldn't do anything like that, would you, Mike?
Of course I wouldn't. But I mean, I did make a deep fake of John Ridding, our CEO, for our training in the FT, so that went down quite well. It was early days of faking. But I'll echo everything that Eric has said there. What we found from on the receiving end is that, as you say, what AI is doing for the criminals is it's lowering the bar of entry. So it means that script kiddies and everything else can suddenly do much more sophisticated attacks. It makes the time from finding an exploit to exploiting an exploit is being brought down, because AI is helping them find the vulnerabilities and develop attacks. And the main one is the phishing emails. And Eric is absolutely right. It just means that the days of the Nigerian prince emailing you to help get the gold out of the country is long gone. Now they're really well written, really difficult to spot. Hence, we have to have secondary controls in everywhere to see it. On the flip side, there are some good controls in the defending world, although there's a line between machine learning, which has been around for a long time in a lot of our security tools, and generative AI. And I think a lot of the sales marketing now is heading towards Gen AI rather than actually the standard machine learning and stuff that's been going on for quite some time in the background. But what I've seen in the tool wise is especially when we're threat hunting, actually a lot of the EDR stuff now will give you some suggested AI ways of threat hunting, which, if you're an inexperienced level 1 analyst, can be quite handy to get them started in looking for stuff out there. And it's just going to get worse, isn't it? I'm waiting for the attack that we don't know about yet. We all kind of understand that, yes, it'll be used to make things easier. It can write stuff, but is there going to be a new type of attack yet that we haven't thought of? I don't know. Maybe Eric's got some inside knowledge about that sort of stuff from his background, but I'm just waiting for it to surprise me.
Yeah, and just like Mike said, is sort of the scary part about security is attackers aren't going away. So as we do better, as we start patching our systems, as we start clicking our links, they're not going to stop. Cybercrime this year is over 12 billion. That's a 55% increase over last year. It's almost doubling year over year. It's not going away. So the trick is, as soon as you fix one problem, you got to keep thinking of what the new avenues are. And to me, the future where you got to be really careful of is what we saw with SolarWinds, where you have a trusted vendor that you drop their server right into the heart of your network. This is what many government and big government contractors did. And then they get compromised, and then they have full access to your system. So if you want to be on the advanced sort of end of cybersecurity class, start looking at who has access to your network as third parties and start really limiting and controlling it, because that's going to be the next attack vector I'm predicting in 2025.
And that's a good point. It's not just what they do to you; it's what they might do through you to third parties, or the same third parties might do. Your vendors might do to you, not because the vendors are being mad, but because they've been infected in ways. The loss that energy intelligence suffered was similar to that, and that our email systems had been compromised. Emails were grabbed, and those emails were used to coerce very good client to send money to a bank account. Was our very good client going to pay us because we lost money that the client thought it was sending to us? No. Is the bank going to give us that money back? No, it's not authorized to. So you're really stuck. A lot of what we've talked about sounds as though it's very expensive, Mike and Eric. We're small companies, a lot of us on Renewed, and granted, the 100x ratio, Eric, that you introduced at the beginning of the show might very well be true, but can little companies actually afford? How do we defend against these things when we have limited resources?
So to me, a few ways of doing it. One is Mike and I both mentioned sort of endpoint security, or what's called EDR. For the really, really good stuff, it's $50, $60 a year per endpoint. So you have 5 computers, that's $300. That's not that expensive. And that stuff is really good. Like it does a really good job of detecting it, locking it down. The stuff with AI that's out there is super solid. Second is, you probably at this point, if you're sort of a smaller publishing company, shouldn't be running your own servers, shouldn't have your own data center. The cloud is so advanced. I mean, whether it's you go with sort of Amazon, AWS, that's top, Google's in the game, Microsoft. And the nice thing there is, if you're outsourcing those services to those third parties, they will patch your servers. They will run all of that. And once again, super reasonable. I mean, we have small publishing clients of ours that we work with, and they're 5 to 8 person shops. And for a 5 to 8 person shop, like for their IT, for their security, for everything, for the entire year, it's like under 1,500. In some cases, we can get it closer to 1,000. So it's not a ton of money. The problem is you need to spend it in the right areas and not overspend in others. Like, you don't need SOC monitoring. You don't need advanced intrusion. You don't need those things. If you focus on endpoint security, a little user awareness, and then outsourcing it to a third party cloud that's going to patch, update, and do all the security for you, you're going to be in real good shape for a pretty low paycheck.
So AWS and Azure and the like are good places to go, because a lot of folks would say, gee, if I go out to the cloud, then I'm really leaving myself vulnerable because I've lost control. But it sounds, Eric, as though in fact you may have lost control in a way, but you've gained security. That's right.
Right. And full disclosure, I have bought and sold many companies. I'm now building another company now where we're a 9-person shop. And the advice I gave you is exactly what we're doing. I'm targeted more because I'm a cyber guy and speaking out about it, but that's what we do. We have EDR. We go in and we actually, not endorsing them, but just telling you what I use. I use CrowdStrike as our endpoint. Once again, no endorsements here. I don't have any money in it. And then we use Microsoft with their 360 Office security suite for all of our accounts. And we've been in really good shape, and I haven't had to do a whole lot of extra stuff. So yeah, if you're focused on the right areas, it actually is a really scalable solution.
And those are the areas that most people, I mean, and I'm far from an expert for sure, but even I have heard about those things. So it's not that you have to go looking for really obscure solutions. They're there right in front of us. Yep. Mike, would you agree with that, or are there tricks that Eric is cheekily keeping from us?
100% agree. And that was exactly what I was going to say is, buy, don't build. Go to these Microsoft, Google, whoever you want to go to, when you get them, turn everything on. You know, there will be Microsoft particularly, it comes fairly vanilla, so make sure you understand that security panel, go through and turn everything on that you possibly can in there. Yes, some things it might be a bit of a pain and might flash up some things here, but you know, live with it. It really is worth it. And you know, you've got the security appropriate to the size of your business. But unfortunately, the bigger you get, sometimes you have to start doing things that aren't available from one cloud provider. So you then end up having two cloud providers, maybe. And sometimes people have to build yourself. And if you're a bigger company, you've got some legacy stuff around there as well. But I absolutely agree that if you can rent it, if you like, go to a cloud provider, especially go to a cloud provider, and don't go to Amazon and build your own servers in Amazon. You know, consume something like Fargate or something, you know, something that gives you a platform to build your things on, rather than build yourself. The more you can go serverless, the more you can get into that sort of world, the less there is for someone to compromise.
Good, good.
I just want to jump on what Mike said, because it's so important, is especially with like Microsoft, they give you a lot of security, but because we're at this interesting point where customers aren't fully demanding it, a lot of it's turned off. So you actually have to go in and turn it on. But all the things we talked about, like account notification, blocking links, and doing all those things, that's all there. And it takes, even if you're not experienced, 15 minutes, you just go under settings, security. It's laid out really nicely, and they'll do recommendations for you. But yeah, you often do have to go in and turn on those features, or for a very small price, you can actually have a Microsoft consultant go in and turn those things on. But I just want to emphasize what Mike said is buying the service isn't enough. You actually have to spend a little time up front configuring it. But once you configure it once, you're good to go.
Yeah. Okay, good. And like a lot of software, as you guys have been saying, the cost is scalable. You're not talking about buying something that's $1 million when you're actually just a $20,000 company. It's scalable to the number of users you have on staff. That's good. Lindsay, let me just make sure that we're not missing any questions, or make sure that we don't have questions from that want to be asked directly from the faces on the screen. I'm getting carried away because I'm pretty excited.
I haven't had any, but I actually have a question, and this is kind of a odd one, but are you more at risk if you're using public Wi-Fi's and different types of Wi-Fi? So you're working in multiple locations, and if so, how do you kind of help with that? Because I'm sure some of us work remote and we kind of work where we're at.
So I can try to give you from the enterprise point of view, and there it can tell you all the cool stuff people can do to hack public Wi-Fi. Is probably so we would always recommend that you use a VPN if you're on a public Wi-Fi. Now, most of your traffic is going to be HTTPS encrypted, so it's end-to-end encrypted anyway. But there are certain attacks I'm sure Eric can talk about where you could be fooled into thinking that you're attached to a secure Wi-Fi and you're not. Whereas if you've got a VPN solution, that will make sure that your whole connection is, and just generally, unless you know, I wouldn't suggest you go and work from a Starbucks free Wi-Fi, especially if it's spelt with a Z in it or something instead. Just be really careful of what you're connecting to, is what I say. But I'm sure Eric's got loads of good pen testing stories about how to compromise Wi-Fi.
Thanks, Michael. Great.
Eric?
Yeah, and it's sort of changed because you talk to, like, you go to hacking conferences and stuff like that, and they're like, public Wi-Fi bad, but the reality is, about 3 years ago, the mandatory standard for pretty much all new web apps and browsers and things like that is what Mike's talking about, where it says HTTPS, not HTTP. And as long as that's SSL, TLS, secure socket layer, transport layer security, which means your traffic's encrypted already. So if you're on public Wi-Fi, you're going to be encrypted and you're going to be okay out of the gate. But running over a VPN never hurts, and being a little cautious never hurts. And here's the thing, real quick story. If you ever want to, in Vegas and you don't feel like going out, but you want to have a good time, is just run a sniffer on the hotel network at the Bellagio. And let me just tell you, people have a lot more interesting lives than I do, because people don't realize it. Normal texting on your iPhone, iPad, and things like that, that's actually not encrypted because of the throughput and overhead so efficiently wise. It's not. So if you're running business over apps that are not encrypted, like texting or others, then you got to be super careful. That's why in Europe and other areas where security is a concern, they use WhatsApp or Signal or some of these others that are basically built in secure texting. I pretty much use Signal for all of, and I'm not endorsing any, I just try like giving solutions. Signal is an encrypted texting app, so now it's automatically encrypted. So I would say either use a VPN because then you're covered regardless, or make sure you're really aware of the apps you're using and they have built-in encryption. Otherwise, you're texting over public Wi-Fi and anybody can see anything you're saying. And by the way, not that any of you would do this, but even if let's just use it to your imagination, certain pictures you might or might not be sending, let's just say those are available. And if you saw some of these cases where these very famous Hollywood stars have had inappropriate pictures posted on the internet, it's because they did it over a public Wi-Fi. Somebody snagged the pictures and then put them out on the internet. So just sort of learn those lessons of always be aware of what you're using and whether it's encrypted.
I think that's really just to get back on that point. We've got journalists all over the world. We've got them in Iran, in China, and Signal is what we tell them to use. It's a really good app. You can set auto delete your messages and all that type of stuff, and it's a really secure service. And we make sure that they all have VPNs that work wherever they are. To a point, we'd also give them a router, our own router to take with them out to sort of these countries, just so they can have extra safety. But yeah, Signal is a good app.
So, Mike, do you have journalists filing stories via Signal from
No,
China?
they won't. But they'll obviously. There's a lot of talking to sources, etc.
Yeah.
And that's where I don't. The stories of it, I don't really care. If someone gets the worst that's going to happen, someone's going to know that story first. So it's not. I'm more concerned with people's safety. So if they're talking to a source in one of these countries, I want to make sure that they're talking to a source in a really secure manner that won't be able to be looked at by the government, whether that be UK government, US government, or Iranian government, if I'm honest.
Sure. Jose, you have one or two questions. If you want to unmute yourself and ask them, otherwise I could make an attempt at getting at what you're interested in. Jose, if you're there.
Oh, I mean,
There you are. Hey,
sorry.
welcome.
Any thoughts on this, on sandboxing, on like a pre-scan of the emails? We recently had some issues with Google spamming us as a company because we made a mistake of sending our like a massive emails through Outlook, so we got flagged. And then we had like a hard time trying to get out of the spam zone. And then, so we have some issues with the sandboxing, but at the same time, we found out that our signatures had links on them, and some of them, they were broke. And I guess Google thought that it was corrupt, so.
Okay, I mean, I think we're talking about several things here. So I think you were saying that you sent out a load of emails via Outlook and got flagged as a spam sender because of the amount. And then you're right, it is quite difficult then to get off of spam lists. There are a few things that you can do. Firstly, make sure that you've got DMARC and DKIM set up and your SPF records are correct.
Yeah.
To make sure that's all set up, and that's a real help. I'm not an expert on not spam, but I know they talk about warming up IP addresses and making sure that people are expecting a lot of emails to come out. We get occasionally if someone in our organization decides to send out sort of a couple of thousand emails, Google will step in and say, no, you're banned now because that's spam. So you make sure you're checking on the amounts that your provider allows you to send out in one go, and work with them. I would suggest to make sure that you're staying within those bounds, or they expect that a load of emails are going out. What we do for mass emails is we use a provider. So we'll use a third-party provider. HubSpot's one of the ones that we use. We set them up as an FT domain to send, and we use them to send on their demand. So all their IPs are expected to send mass emails, so they don't get picked up as spam. Is how we do it. I don't know, Eric, if you've got any more knowledge on that front than me.
Yeah. I just echoing on that is you want good security in your email for you and your employees, like whether it's Google or Microsoft or others, and that's going to limit and control volumes, amounts, and types of emails. So if you're doing any sort of mass emails, even more than 50 or 100 to external addresses, you really want to use a third-party provider.
Yeah.
Trying to use Google of those is just going to really get you in trouble, or going to turn off your security or get your legitimate emails blocked. Like I said, I always like giving names of what we use, so you just have an example, but no endorsement. We like SendGrid. SendGrid, just being honest, tends to be a little more forgiving than some of the others, like in terms of but you got to be careful of the opt-in laws, because there's a lot of different laws out there of unsolicited and all that stuff. So just be careful. But SendGrid tends to give you a little more freedom and control over that. So you want to use a third party. And then your other question on sandboxing, I would say that's definitely more of sorry, more of an advanced tactic or technique. And essentially what that is, that's where you run your apps or your services in different isolated environments. So if one gets compromised, it can't impact others. I would say until you're probably at maybe 50 or 100 employees, or you're starting to get fairly larger, Sandbox is probably not worth the benefit you get for the cost, because it can get expensive. It's fairly hard to manage. You can get false positives associated with that. So I would say, so to start with your EDR on your endpoint, your patching, your outsourcing on your servers. And then if you get larger and you're starting to see more threats and more targets, you could potentially look at sandboxing, but that's probably more of an advanced medium-sized company tactic.
Yeah, we have like around like a 50, we have in people we are 25, but because of the amount of email we have sent, then we have like a 50 accounts, and I think like that's where it make it like more like easy for us to monitor, like with the sandboxing. We were also told when we had the issue with being flagged is because we were sending it from the Microsoft server rather than we usually use Drip as well. And they didn't have the unsubscribe button. And so you didn't have like most of the people nowadays, it's like they see massive amount of email, they immediately flag you as a spam if you don't have the option of unsubscribe.
Yeah. And sort of a couple of what I call easier and cheaper sandboxing techniques, which is sort of alluded to, is use different accounts. So like when I go in and I'm going to manage our SendGrid or do any of that, I actually use a separate laptop with a separate account. So this way it's separate and isolated. And then that system is only turned on when I'm using SendGrid. So now if I was using SendGrid from my regular laptop, I'm on that probably 15 hours a day, which means if that laptop gets compromised, they can now access my bank account. They can access my SendGrid. They can access everything. It's a huge exposure point. But if I actually have different accounts with different laptops, and now when I do all my financial work, I use a separate laptop, right? Laptops are like $700. They're pretty cheap. And that laptop's only on for 2 hours, 3 hours a week. Now, if somebody compromises it, the risk and exposure is much smaller. Same thing with my SendGrid. So what I do is sort of a cheaper version and a more safer version of sandboxing is I'll actually just have a couple of different laptops, one for SendGrid, one for critical apps, one for banking, one for regular work, use different accounts. And now that greatly reduces the risk and exposure because those systems are only on during a very small window of time.
Well, that raises a question in my mind, Eric. I hadn't really thought of this, but would you advise us to advise our staff to turn equipment off as they go home for the night, or even as they go out for lunch?
Absolutely. And the reason is this. I sort of mentioned it earlier, is an attacker, they're going to break into your computer and use it as what we call a pivot point or a launching off to get access. Many people store their passwords on their laptop, right? They store their information, they store their credentials. So if I can get malware on your laptop, I basically have a gold mine. Now, here's the issue. If I start going and using your bank or your things during working hours, you're going to probably notice because your computer's going to be very slow. You're going to notice unusual windows popping up. You're going to be using unusual things. So most attackers rely on the fact that people keep their computers up 24/7. And I know when your activity stops. So as if I was an attacker, and this is how they work, they're going to put malware on your laptop, and they're going to put an alert that says when there's inactivity for more than 2 hours, ping me. And then they get pinged knowing you haven't been on your system for 2 hours, and then they're going to use your system. So while you're sleeping from 10 p.m. to 6 in the morning, they're using your computer, and then they know you log back in at 6 because they have monitoring, and they're going to be off by 5. So you're using your system during the day, they're using your system at night. And the reason is, what value do you gain by keeping the computer on? Turn it off, disconnect it, make it harder for the adversary, reduce the window.
Good. That's one. Mike,
Sorry,
any thoughts?
that is also keep your work and home life separate as well. So don't use your work email address to open accounts or do online shopping, go to your bank. Keep your work and home life separate. That way, if your home life gets compromised, your work life is safe. If your work life gets compromised, your home life is safe. So just split them out and never the twain, as we say.
Boy, I hope my home life never becomes compromised. I'm not sure. The one last question. This has just been terrific, rapid fire stuff, but a really good question from Gerard van der Worm to close off, which is, with attackers becoming all the more sophisticated and this threat being all the more existential, which folks within a company ought to be involved in making cybersecurity planning? If you had a dream team of people who were planning, should it be the CEO? Should the CEO wash his or her hands of this and hand it off to somebody else? Who in an organization is in the best position to kind of make a cybersecurity plan?
So to me, if your company is under 12 people, it should be everyone. Because everyone's a target, everyone's a risk, everyone plays a critical role. In our company, when we talk about, I'm the CEO and the chief scientist, when we make security decisions and we do awareness training and we do all that, it's all hands meetings, because everyone is important and everyone is critical. When you start getting larger, above 12, it becomes a little harder. In those cases, it has to come from the top. If you have a CEO, a COO, a CFO, that they're not following the rules, no one else is. So we've had a lot of cases where we work with CEOs and they're like, why aren't anybody following the rules? And I'm like, because you're not, right? People are always going to look at the parent, right? But one of the jokes I always said is, when my son was 4 years old, he used to curse a lot. And everyone would be like, discipline your son, he's cursing. And I'm like, where do you think he's getting it from, right? So I would discipline myself, because kids don't pick up curse words unless your parents are saying it. So I would put myself in timeout, not my kid, and I would clean up my language. So it's sort of the same thing. If executives aren't doing what they're supposed to with security, you have zero chance of their employees following.
Mike, any final word?
No, I absolutely agree with that. It's got to come from the top, unless you're big enough to have a CISO or someone who's charged with looking after that stuff. But even then, even though the message has got to come from the top, I think it does help to appoint somebody. Because sometimes you get decisions by committee and nothing ever gets decided. But if it's your head, whoever looks after your IT, you say to them, actually, you look after our security. Think about security when you're planning for your IT. So it's good to have a point that is a security as part of their job person as well. But Eric's absolutely right. It's got to come from the top, and that message has got to come down. It's one of the most important things that we do in the company.
Could I just ask one more question? I know we're at the hour, but let's say if you have, I don't know, a cloud team, a DevOps team that are bringing in lots of money, how do you then manage that? They want to do their thing, but it's not necessarily security best practice, but then you have someone in charge of security. How do you manage that?
So to me, two things. One is have them on a separate network. Just have them separate from your corporate network. Second thing is, if they're dealing with critical data and critical information, then it needs to be a non-negotiable. Like I have big DevOps teams that I work with for our different clients, and it's like, listen, if you're not going to follow the security procedures, I don't care how good you are, we're going to fire you. It's not something we're going to tolerate. I don't care how good a programmer you are. If you put my company at risk, if you put my data at risk, it's not going to be tolerated. Now, that's sort of the negative. What I find works really well with DevOps is do the positive. And I do this with all my team members. If you have no security breaches, if you have no security issues, if you've never clicked on a link for the entire year, I'll give you a $500 bonus, or I'll give you a $1,000 bonus. Money speaks louder. So I would say try with the DevOps, the positive, saying, hey guys, I know you want to be creative, but security is this important that if you follow the rules, we're going to give you a little X amount bonus. And that's probably going to get a lot farther than trying to take the aggressive. But both approaches need to be taken, because the reality is you can't tolerate sloppy security in your DevOps.
And I guess the secret, the $500 bonus is great, but don't make it a gift certificate to Starbucks where there's crappy Wi-Fi security. Mike, last word.
I was going to say that it's a fallacy that it's harder to do it properly as well. I mean, generally, I find that people want to do stuff and want to skip security, it's because they're lazy. They don't want to do it. It's not. It doesn't take a lot more effort to do stuff according to the rules of a company. And it's people say, oh, we can't do that, it gets in the way. Actually, no. If you do security properly, it shouldn't get in the way. And so generally, it's having that conversation with them and saying, no, just do your job properly.
Well, and with that, I think I'll point back to one of those original statistics, which is, according to Eric, a 50-to-1 ratio. 1 hour of security work, 50 hours might save you 50 hours worth of cyber mess. So the odds are with you. You follow the rules. The odds favor you. So, guys, this is fantastic. I'm not sure this is everybody's idea of a Christmas present or a holiday gift, but this has certainly been very, very helpful to me. And I hope others will take this message out to their companies and use it. With that, I wish you all well. Thank you for helping us finish the year at Renewed.